Hey everyone, it is Kristen and Carter, and we are so excited to be here together. Welcome to week 2, session 2 of Experience Life. How did we do this past week? As a recap of last week, our goal was to do one thing experiential over the course of last week, and I trust we all did that. And so I'll share with you what we did if you want to share with you what you guys did. And then let me introduce Carter. He is my husband, and we are co-directors of Experience Growth together. So welcome, Carter.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm so excited to be here today. As you can tell by my voice, I couldn't be more excited to be here. And so sometimes life happens, and this is what your voice sounds like. And so I'm so excited to share what we've been working on and
Yeah. So full disclosure up front. He lost his voice yesterday. He taught class and coached all day long. And then I, just in case you're wondering, I'm short of breath. The reason I'm short of breath is that I have a 7.5-pound human in my body that I'm going to be, that will be being delivered in a couple of days from now. And last night, it was funny. We were talking, and I had to rearrange the schedule later in the afternoon because our dog was sick. Took her in. She ended up with having a UTI, which is a good scenario for, it's a treatable thing. And then we had our 3-year-old, Ellie, just running around crazy, wild, with pizza all over her face. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just life. That's how life shows up sometimes. And a couple of weeks ago, I had made up a quote that I was pretty proud of. So I'll share it with you guys today. It was after church on Sundays. We always go get tacos. And I said, life is like a taco. It's super messy sometimes, yet it tastes so good too. And so we just kind of laughed because, a couple of days before having a baby, he loses his voice as he's going to be presenting today. I'm short of breath only because I have a human in my body. And so there we are. But we are very excited to bring this class to you today, present together today. Next week, Carter will be presenting solo, and our final week will be together again. So just wanted to let you guys know that. So as we asked, go ahead and share in your in the chat box if you would like what you did to live experientially. I'm going to share what we did in our world. Is I took Ellie, our 3-year-old, to get mani-pedis, and we went shopping. So she got a brand new little rainbow dress, and we got mani-pedis. So that's what we did. And then later in the afternoon, we booked a babysitter and went to dinner with 2 of our groups of best friends.
Yeah.
So which is super fun. So I trust that all of you guys have spent the time on your self-reflection and on your workbook. You had about an hour's worth of action plan, and so that was your homework for the week. We're going to do that every single week. There's going to be it's a personal journey. Somebody asked me a question. They said, well, what's the right answer in order to live experientially? And the thing is, there is no right answer. This is your personal journey. So what you choose to do to live experientially is going to be different than what we choose to do. And you may not want to go get mani and pedis with a 3-year-old yet.
Yeah, I didn't go.
Carter didn't want to go. Yet it's your own personal journey. So we're going to be on this journey together, yet there's no right, there's no wrong answer. The only wrong answer would be to not do it, to not be authentic and honest with yourself as we dive in.
So in today's session, we're going to dive deeper into the 6 pillars of living experientially. Last week, we went into all 6 of those more on a surface level. We kind of water skied along the surface, and yet today, what our goal is to really scuba dive, go deep into each of the pillars. So in the action plan that you're going to have later today, you'll be spending time to reflect on each pillar. The questions will help you determine your motivation around each pillar and the opportunities within each. Our goal is to help you identify what you're doing and what you could be doing to be living your best life in each of the foundational pillars of living experientially. So this is all to set up to determine your drivers, sustainers, and maintainer pillars, which we'll be doing next week, along with your building your personal mission statement, again, which we'll be doing next week. And then to end it, we're going to culminate all of it with an action plan so that you can live experientially yearly, monthly, weekly, and daily. So let's dive into our first pillar, and it's going to be the career pillar. And the 3 categories we're going to be talking about are income, impact, and job.
And we're on page 3 of our workbooks if you're following along.
Thanks very much. Yeah, 3 of your workbooks. So as we look at income, we're going to really discuss income as a really critical piece of living an experiential career, right? For most of us, in order to live experientially, we have to earn money. And most of the time, for most of us, that money comes from our career. Yet know that income is merely a satisfier, it's not a driver. See, increased pay will only increase engagement to a certain extent. Once we make enough money, we won't turn down more, yet it's a diminishing marginal return. So it's interesting. We looked at a social psychological study done in New York a handful of years ago. This group of researchers pulled up a truck and asked complete strangers to help them move boxes from the truck into a store. And what was interesting is a high percentage of people actually did it, which was kind of incredible if you think about the way you think about stereotypical New Yorkers, right? And then what was more interesting, they did the same experiment the next day, right? The same researchers pulled up the same truck, the same place, the same store. And this time, instead of asking people for help, they offered people $25 to move the boxes. Now, far few people actually went to move the boxes. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that people really are not after working for money as long as they are, as long as they have their needs met, right? So what it tells us is that money is not the biggest driver in that. What really is the key to fulfillment in a career is really more about how we impact others during that career.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which brings us to impact. So impact is our second lens that we're looking at career through. So self-worth, we know, is built through people valuing your contribution, and you really valuing your own contribution, and ultimately convincing yourselves and others that your contribution is meaningful, right? Simon Sinek, he's a speaker and an author, and for those of you who happen to know Holly Priestner, Simon is her celebrity crush. He's passionate about helping people feel that they matter in the workplace, and he recently said this. He said, what we forget is that no matter where we're born or when we're born, we're always going to have a lot in common. We're all human, and regardless of age or demographic, all humans want to feel valued. We want to feel significant. We want to be empowered, to feel trusted and safe, and be inspired by the work that we do and feel as if we are contributing to something that matters. And we want to know that our organizations care about us. We want to know that we're not seen as machines or numbers, spitting out just numbers, right? We want to be seen as more than that. So the fact is, each and every one of us has a unique background and life experience who makes us who we are today. So as leaders in an organization, we have to honor and recognize the differences within everybody. Next, our next lens is job. So think about a job. A job, it's what you do. It's every day. We all have a job. It's what we're really responsible for, right? So as we discussed last week, approximately a third of people spend their lives working at their jobs. So if you're going to spend a third of your life working, it might as well be something that fulfills you, right? We talked about that. So we're going to bring an exercise to you that's really fun. We did it personally when we heard this gentleman speak. Marcus Buckingham, he's a professional speaker and an author, and he has a perspective on work that focuses on the concept of realizing your strengths rather than your weaknesses. And he says this, grow buds on branches versus grow new branches. Think about that. Grow buds on the branches you already have versus the new ones. In his book, 9 Lies About Work, he identifies an activity that we're going to bring to you as part of your action plan. And we'll share this now, and this exercise is going to be really fun. I hope that you take the time to really work through it. He says there are 3 things that you can do to identify what he determines are the things that you love about your job. And if you're taking notes in your workbook, these are the 3 things. First, he says, spend a week in love with your job. So spend a week in love with your job. What does that mean? He says, make a list of all the things that you love and make a list of all the things that you loathe. So it's a love it list, loathe it list. And in the action plan in your workbook, you're going to have space to do this. He says that the things that you love about your job are called red threads. The second thing he says to do is take those red threads and make the best of your job most of your job. In studies, he says that 73% of people say that they feel like they could actively edit their job description if they chose to. It's just often people don't take the time to really reflect and recognize what it is that they love or loathe. So in this course, we are taking the time to reflect, right? So let's be clear. The one thing he didn't say was that you're going to do none of the things that you loathe. You will probably still do things you don't enjoy. Yet if you can do more of what you love, then you're going to have energy and passion for a job, which is really what we're seeking. And then third, he says, find teams that play to your different strengths. What he means by that is find people to partner with or join your team so that each team has a well-rounded strengths within the organization. So by doing this exercise, when you do your action plan, you're going to spend the time really reflecting on exactly where you're living out your experiential career or where you might not be. So as we're really diving deep to evaluate the career pillar in the context of creating an experiential career, income is critical to living experientially. Without it, we can't satisfy basic needs and really live beyond that, right? Yet however, we know that income is not our driver. When it comes down to it, what's more important is that you're passionate for your job and you're passionate about creating and making an impact. So as you consider this pillar, are you in love with your job? And what impact are you really creating? And when have you been passionate about your job and your strengths, and are you doing that? When you do that, the income will come. So as we evaluate weekly on our action plan, I want you to really focus again, like I said, be really honest with yourself, be authentic, be truthful. Even if career might not be the most important pillar in your life, it is probably a dominant pillar in terms of your time. So we really want to make sure that you're deliberately creating one that satisfies you, that you love to go to every day.
Awesome. So now we're going to turn to the pillar of relationships. And so for those of you that are playing along at home, we're on page 4 of our workbooks. So we define relationships in terms of the 5 areas. That's mentors, love, friends, wealth determiners, and professional. So last week, Kristen mentioned the Harvard Happiness Study. And as a recap, that said at the end of your life, it's the quality of the relationships that will determine your level of happiness. Therefore, the relationship with those around you are so critical. So we'll start with relationship number 1, and that's mentors. So the question is, what is a mentor? Well, we often think, well, the definition of mentor is an experienced and trusted advisor. We often think of mentors as someone that we know personally. Well, a mentor certainly can be that. A mentor is also a person that you learn from, whom you may or may not even know personally. It has been recorded that Steve Jobs mentored Mark Zuckerberg, Maya Angelou mentored Oprah, and Warren Buffett mentored Bill Gates. Now, I realize these are really famous examples of a mentor-mentee relationship, and what if we don't have those kind of relationships and those kind of connections today? That's fair, yet couldn't Oprah be your mentor? What about Warren Buffett? Even Steve Jobs? See, it's not about the personal relationship all the time. It's learning from what they taught. And these guys taught an immense amount, and still do for some of them, in regards to business, innovation, investing, wealth, and they're all phenomenal in what they've brought to the world. And they've all shared their fail-forward moments and lessons learned from those that we can take into our own lives and learn from their mistakes and learn from their wins. So ask yourself this: who are your mentors? It's ideal that you have a personal relationship with mentors, yet you don't really need several. So who are you deliberately learning from? And also, who are you pouring into? Who are you a mentor for? In your action plan today, we're going to have key relationships that we're going to define as part of our reflection time. So be thinking, who are my top 3 mentors? What can I foster, create, and nurture in my own mentor relationships?
So next, we're going to dive into our next pillar, and relationship is loves. So loves are people that you would consider to be family, like this guy right here, your kids, the kid that's in my belly right now, parents, kids, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, anybody who you really, really love. And these are likely to be your longest relationships in your life. So it's really important that with those people that you love, you have to be intentional with your love relationship. That's like the most critical relationship. So as I mentioned earlier, when thinking about what I could do experientially this week as the challenge for all of you guys, I thought, well, I would like to spend some special time with my 3-year-old before our, world changes. So that's why we decided to go get a pedicure. Plus, Mama needed a pedicure, right? So ask yourself, who are those people that you love? And are you intentional with being experiential and spending time with them? Do you do date night together with your spouse? What about date night with your kids? How are you being intentional? So as you reflect on your love relationships, where are there opportunities for you to be more intentional and really foster and create and nurture your love relationships? Next, we're going to move on to friends. So friends is another key relationship that we have. A science writer and author of the new book, Friendship, she says this. She says, we don't fully appreciate our friendships because if we did, we'd take cultivating those intimate bonds as seriously as working out or eating well. Meaning, eating well and working out is as important as our friendships. Yeah. There's a new field of science, and it's revealing that social connections play such a vital role in our health. And the effect of these few core relationships really extends beyond just our social lives. It influences our health on the cellular level, from our immune system to our cardiovascular system. When she was asked about the role that social media plays, since social media is such a large part of our world, she said that looking at a person face to face, the brain responds differently chemically than it does if you're on a screen. So if you're online, certainly you're not face to face with somebody, right? So what this means through all of her research is that people need to realize the value of relationships and friendships. And it really gives us permission to prioritize those friendships and not really think of friendships as a chore, more of something that it's good for your health. And when you hang out with your friends, it's good for you and it's good for them. So prioritize spending time with your friends, which, we were able to do that this weekend, which is really important to us. So.
That's right. So the next lens that we're going to look through is professional relationships. And we love this slide that we put on the screen here, especially given that Krista mentioned earlier, we spend a third of our lives at work. So it's critical to our well-being and the well-being of our colleagues that we have strong bonds in professional setting. So how are you intentional about the time you spend with your professional colleagues? So I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here in that, I'm kind of guilty of whenever I come into the office or whenever I kind of start the day, we do a lot of work remotely. So some of our colleagues are on the other side of the computer screen. I kind of get to a zone and really kind of focus on getting stuff accomplished. And so I've intentionally created a habit of making sure I say hello to everybody right when I first walk in. People kind of laugh about Carter's fist bumps. I've been getting ready for coronavirus before coronavirus was a thing apparently, and so because I want to show them how much I really do care about them and build that bond and build that relationship. So I've worked to create a habit around that. And the other thing is, with us and for me specifically, it's, what's a really great thing is to celebrate the special moments that team members have that are coming into our world. And so we're very fortunate that we have a team member that is really great at that. I historically have not been really great at acknowledging those accomplishments and those milestones. So we actually have a team member in place that does an incredible job at birthdays, at professional milestones, whether it's the first home sold because we're in real estate, and or selling their $1 million in property. He's done this so that we as a team can show our folks how much we really do care about them and bring us all together to create great bonds at work, because it's instrumental for us as people on a team and folks that we work with to let them know how much they mean to us, and for us to create those bonds so that we can have a great professional relationships. Our final key is wealth determiners. And so these are the people that you determine wealth for and that determine wealth for you. So as we look at that, one of the questions to ask is who might be your biggest wealth determiners? Maybe it's your boss if you have one. Who creates opportunity for you? In business, we have a lot of past clients, and we're so grateful that we have so many raving fans. Those are a lot of our wealth determiners for our business. And so what we do is we like to show them how much we care about them by doing things like events and doing special things for them whenever they send us referrals, so that we can really love on them for that. Also, the other question is, who do you determine wealth for? Well, for me as a coach, I'm very fortunate that I get to determine wealth for a lot of the people, and really all the people that I'm fortunate to get to coach. And so in those relationships, I'm challenging them and really coaching them to their greatness, to their potential. So it's my role really to push them out of their comfort zone and to take action. And so I know that when they get out of their comfort zone and take action, that's going to create wealth and success for their life. So it's really important to me, something that I take great pride in, to make sure that I'm determining wealth for those people there. So ask yourself, who are the 3 people that determine wealth for me? And also, who are the top 3 people that I determine wealth for? And again, what can I do to foster, nurture wealth determiners in my life in those relationships?
So I need to change the slides. There we go.
Thanks.
There, I forgot to change the slide for wealth determiner. So we just heard that. Now we're going to head into our next pillar, which is wealth. And we're going to look at wealth through the lens of opportunity, people, and giving. So opportunity. Let's dive in there. Wealth is created from opportunity, and opportunity opens up the doors to experiences, right? Without wealth, you're going to be hard pressed to be able to live and give experientially, which is why we must be intentional about searching and seeking and taking and making wealth opportunities for ourselves. So working in your day job and earning an income can really only get you so far. There's a finite amount of wealth that you can earn from a paycheck unless you're intentional about spotting opportunities. And opportunities would be things like investing in yourself, investing in others, in businesses, and creating partnerships. So there are 3 really strong ways that you can be opportunity spotters to invest and create opportunity for yourself. And that first one would be through your income, through your paycheck. Although we know that's not going to get us all the way there, right? We also have to be opportunity spotters when it comes to investing, and then when it comes to partnerships. And wealth goals are going to be different for everyone. And they should really be driven around your passion. So think about your passion. What are you interested in? What questions can you ask yourself in a reflection process do you have a knowledge gap? Is there something that you really need to learn? In what ways could you do something that really moves the needle forward when it comes to your wealth opportunities? I know a lot of you are in real estate. So do you have a goal to purchase investment real estate this year and invest in what you know? I'm going to change the slides. There we go. So early on in our real estate career, we made it a goal to buy a piece of property every year, which we've actually successfully done. And about 10 years ago, we purchased a rental property, and last year sold it for profit, turned that money into a 1031 exchange. And then most recently, our last purchase was a coast house in Rockport, Texas, which doubles as a vacation rental. So our original investment about 10 years ago was about $20,000. And then we sold it 10 years later. We made a profit of about $140,000 when it was an initial pretty small investment. Use that 1031 exchange, turn it into a vacation rental. So really investing doesn't have to start with this grandiose thing. It can start really small. The challenge is you just have to do it, right? When's the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. When's the next best time to plant that tree? Today. So we, have to really think, how can we be strategic with our wealth? And so the picture on the screen is a picture of the original property that we purchased 10 years ago. And then the second picture is the view at our coast house with our daughter looking out the window at sunrise. So, and we were able to create great, wonderful memories by doing that.
That's right. And next pillar of wealth, if you will, is people, right? We all need people. Wealth is not created in a vacuum. Therefore, we must play a long-term game with long-term people. Short-term game, everyone's looking to make themselves rich. In a long-term game, everyone's looking to make each other rich. So the benefits in life come from compound interest, right? Be that in creating wealth, in relationships, and yet really in all the 6 foundational pillars too, right? It's all about compound interest. So ask yourself, do you want to be successful? Well, clearly by you actually being here and attending this webinar and watching this, the answer of course is yes. Therefore, you have to work with people. And you have to figure out who you can trust over a long period of time, right? As the screen says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. No one succeeds alone, and we need others. So if you're going to get incredibly wealthy, incredibly hard work is a must, and that cannot stand alone. No one will get there without hard work, but the who you work with and the what you do will be equally as important. So we're going to take a look at our third lens, and that's around wealth, and that's around giving. As Anne Frank says, no one has ever become poor by giving. People who generously contribute their time, their money, their kindness are healthier, happier, and more confident than those that do not. And that's according to research from Notre Dame, University of Cal Berkeley, and other academic institutions. In those studies, we've learned that acting generously causes neurochemical changes in the brain and increasing the pleasure response. The more satisfied and directed you feel in life, the more generous you are. It becomes an upward spiral. In a recent study published by Health Psychology, researchers gave participants a sum of money and instructed them to spend, one group to spend it on themselves and another group to spend it on other people. Well, the results were convincing. Those that spent the money, gave generously, significantly lowered their blood pressure. Right? The study said the drop in blood pressure was equivalent to what you might see starting a new aerobic exercise program. That's pretty significant, right? That's a internal change just by giving, by being givers. And what's interesting is we actually did a very similar thing to this with our team a couple of years ago around the Christmas time. So what we did was we gave everybody a little bit of money and said, hey, spend some of this on yourself and some of this on a stranger at the mall, kind of a pay it forward kind of thing. And then at the conclusion, we had everybody come back and everyone kind of shared what they bought for themselves. And then they also shared the stories about buying something for the strangers in the mall. And what was so cool in that moment, right? People were so much more excited to share about what they gave and who they gave it to and the story around that, more so than they cared about whatever they bought for themselves. And the other interesting thing is that everybody on the team did the pay it forward activity before they bought for themselves, and whatever was left, they bought whatever they wanted for themselves. So it just goes to show that when we give, giving is so experiential, and it makes us feel so much better about who we are. So when we think about giving, there are really four things that we can give. Number one is our time, right? We can go volunteer. Number two is our resources, right? Things that we already have, possessions that we already have. We can give those resources out. Knowledge. What do you know? What are you good at that you can give to someone else? And then of course money, right? We all know we can give money. That's of course the quickest way, especially for folks that are limited on time and resource. So of all the things that you can do and all the ways that you can give, how will you give?
So next, we're going to move into our next foundational pillar, personal growth. And we are on page 6 of the workbook as you're following along and taking notes. Just make sure that you are on the right page of the workbook. So we're going to talk about environment first. So we tend to believe that our habits are a product of our motivation, the talent, our efforts, and of course all these really do matter. Yet the surprising thing is that over a long period of time, your personal characteristics are going to get overpowered by your environment. Your environment is often the thing that's going to steer you forward or hold you back. In the first session, I quoted James Clear, and he has a quote, something he says, and I repeat it to myself, and Chris Suarez says it all the time. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. And this showed up for me as an aha recognition moment a couple of weeks ago. In our office, I've always been somebody who takes the stairs. So I park in the garage. I take 2 flights of stairs up. And recently, as a security measure, the office locked the stairs from the garage. So you had to either use your little key card or take the elevator. And that little change caused me to start taking the elevator. So I just started taking the elevator into the office every day. And it occurred to me, like, well, how hard is it really to pull my key card out, which is in the back of my phone, my little phone case, right? Like, the back of that. How hard is it? My phone is usually in my hand to begin with. If it's not, and it's in my backpack, how hard is it to pull my phone out of my backpack, scan it to the scanner, and take the stairs? And it's maybe 2 to 3 steps, and like they're itty bitty, like very, very minor. So I did it. I just thought, I'm gonna figure out how hard is it really to take the stairs, which it was very simple, very mindless to take the stairs, yet those 2 to 3 additional steps caused me for about 2 weeks before I even realized it, the environment that changed. I was just going the easier route, the point of least resistance. The point of least resistance before was just, I always was a stair taker. I could just open up the door. So the 2 steps, that environmental change really impacted me, and it helped me make a less good habit, or a good habit a less good habit, right? So it just goes to show that that environment is so key in everything. So, that's a very small, simple, silly, almost silly example, yet it was a big aha moment for me when I realized that little bit of friction made a big difference. So if we really want to get better at life and improve, we have to control our environment and have awareness around that environment. It took me about 2 weeks to have the awareness around that, how that new change was not really serving me. It was hindering me from getting my steps in. And it's important to get your steps in, right? So then you take that and reflect on like your work environment. Does your work environment support productivity for you? If not, what needs to change? What about your bedtime routine? We're going to talk a little bit more about rest and how important that is. Yet, do you have your phone on the nightstand, or do you move it into another room? Or does the phone there tempt you to stay up and scroll and stay up late on your phone? So we're going to transform this class. I want you to be aware of the environment and who you want to become. Temptation comes from our environment. And if we desire to make positive changes, we have to set up life to avoid temptation. Same thing with cookies. If there's a cookie in my environment, like I mentioned last week, I'm probably going to eat it. So I have to avoid making sure that cookies are not in my environment, and I won't eat them. If they're there, though, I'm just going to snag one, right? So the next lens is mindset. We're going to look at the lens of mindset as it comes to personal growth. Mindset is really, it's what we believe. It's the law of belief. And the law of belief says that our beliefs become our reality. So you see what you believe, not believe what you see. I'll say that again. You see what you believe, not believe what you see. And as a result, you can tell what you believe by what you do and how you show up. So we already know that success is 90% mindset and how we think. And it's critical to our happiness and our perspective and the lenses of how we see the world. We either see the world, the glass half empty or the glass half full, and you get to choose. And we all get to choose that perspective. Yet sometimes we forget that we have the choice to make that perspective, right? Yet at the same time, that mindset that we're like shaped with, it's a lot deeper than that. Studies show that our mindset's really shaped and formed and programmed for us as children. And if we're lucky enough to have been intentionally molded as a growth-minded child, then we're probably in the minority. The classical education system that we were probably mostly raised in is unintentionally creates a fixed mindset based on the environment and the way that children are taught, the way that children are tested. That said, parenting also plays a huge role, yet I reflect and think, how intentional were our parents, were your parents? How intentional are we as parents? Now we are very intentional with our children, or with our one daughter, and will be with our second. Yet we're lucky to have had this exposure and understand this and really understand it at a deeper level. A really great book that I highly recommend reading is the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. She really digs into the 2 different types of mindset based on a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And so that's really the crux of her book. And she talks about a fixed mindset, somebody who's a non-learner. Growth mindset, someone who's a learner, who wants to learn. A fixed mindset, someone who is a victim versus somebody who's empowered. Someone who blames versus takes ownership. Someone who plays not to lose versus playing to win. Someone who fears failure or embraces a challenge. She says that everybody has either a fixed or a growth mindset, and it can change depending on the context. There are different contexts with which you can have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And the one really kind of key thing is that you can get to the very top of whatever craft you're in, yet it's the way you think that's going to keep you at the top. And she gives a really great sports analogy of John McEnroe versus Billie Jean King. And I'm guessing many of you know who that is. John McEnroe was famous for being really awful on the tennis court, and Billie Jean King was not. She was lovely, whatnot. So both were excellent tennis players with excellent skills, yet with very different mindsets. McEnroe would blame everything whenever he lost. He would blame it on something external to himself. So it was either I ate something bad, or I didn't get enough sleep, or the officials were terrible, but he was always full of excuses on the court. Where Billie Jean King would always admit fault or display an attitude of willingness to work harder the next time and blame external circumstances that was just not part of the dialogue. Both were excellent at the craft of tennis, yet had very different dispositions towards winning the game. Also, we recently digested a podcast by Brian Tracy, and he talks about how high performers are shown to have positive self-talk, and they eliminate negative self-talk. So are you talking to yourself positively, or are you talking to yourself negatively? Successful people tend to have a lens of interpreting everything that happens to them as positive. They have a positive perspective about every situation. So they just view everything in the positive, seeing the glass half full versus the glass half empty. And he says that there are 5 real key ways that you can mentally program yourself in a positive way. Number 1, if you're taking notes in your workbook, affirmations. Affirmations are those repeated commands. Whether or not you know it, everything you say to yourself is an affirmation. So are you intentionally creating positive affirmations or negative? Next, number 2, he says, write out your goals. So write those goals out and make sure you're looking at them. Number 3, positive visualization. Most every athlete does positive visualization. And when you mix that emotion with the picture, it really becomes a reality. And then next, feeding your mind with positive things like books, content, trash in, trash out, right? My parents used to say that to me as I was growing up, and I never got it. I was like, oh, that's silly. I can't go watch a rated R movie when I was a teenager and I was like super sheltered. And now I totally see the value. I mean, whatever you consume, it stays in your brain. It doesn't go away. Everything is a recording. So are you putting positive things in your mind, or are you putting negative things in your mind? And then finally, 5th, it's people that you associate with. We know through our relationships, and diving a little bit deeper, those key relationships are important. And who are you associating with? Are you associating with positive people or negative people? Make sure that you're associating your top 5 people are people who you see as positive.
So we're going to move on to our 3rd key within the personal growth pillar, and that is curiosity. And so really, in order for you to have personal growth, you really need to have just to really stay curious, right? I mean, think about young kids in our world, right? Aren't they really the most curious of all the people, right? And so and maybe you've experienced that if you have kids of your own, or maybe you have nieces or nephews, maybe you remember being a kid, right? We all understand that kids are very curious. So as we've showed and mentioned, that we've got a little daughter named Ellie. She's now 3, and so guess what stage of life she's in? She's in the why stage, right? Yeah. So everything for her is a question about why. Why this? Why that? Why mommy? Why daddy? And so for many people, right, that kind of constant why could kind of get on our nerves. And really, if it does, that's really our own adult impatience. Right? She's seeking to learn to understand, what's going on in the world, why things are the way that they are. And really, and if we have negative reaction, that's really on us as adults. Right, because as human beings, we are all asking questions and staying curious, and we do that by doing. Studies tell us that between the ages of birth to 6, humans develop and learn faster than any other stage of life. Yet learning never does stop. Although oftentimes as we grow older, curiosity gets suppressed. We must do what we can to channel our childlike curiosity and ask questions. A mantra that Kristen and I have is we only get answers to the questions that we ask. So are you asking enough questions? Are you asking the right questions of the right people? Dan Gilbert is a professor of psychology at Harvard, and he said, human beings are a work in progress that mistakenly think that we're finished. Do that again. Human beings are a work in progress that mistakenly think that we're finished. Very similar to my voice. One constant in our life, of course, is change. And so, as we think about a change as a constant, as more we stay curious, we can actually, change can be a hindrance or it can be a positive. It's going to push us forward and have us continuing to grow personally. And then we're going to move on to our fifth foundational pillar, and that is health and nutrition. And we're going to look at this through the lens of nutrition, movement, and rest. So a lot of research that we're going to share with you comes from John Berardi, PhD and founder of Precision Nutrition. It's the world's largest online health coaching company. He also sits on the health and performance boards of places like Nike, Titleist, Equinox. Here's what Dr. Berardi had to say about nutrition. He says that the food is fuel story reduces fuel merely to gasoline. Our bodies to really like dumb machines, and you and me as calorie accountants. We all know I shouldn't be counting anything. So calories is certainly one of them. And really, we can't just count calories and have a one-size-fits-all approach to food. Really, if you do that and subscribe to that, it's really kind of a dangerous philosophy from a health perspective. And really, it's kind of sad because food is so much more than that. Food in our bodies are really integrated and entwined. Food, when we have it, is packed with meaning, it's packed with information, it's packed with communication. Every food decision that we make sends a message to our bodies. Every food choice is an opportunity to direct, shape, remake our health, our bodies, our composition, our performance, and our well-being. So what do we do about nutrition to make the best decisions? We must understand that food is a science, and each person with their own blueprint may respond to food differently. So for me, I've experienced this. So we're going to share a picture here of me on the left and me on the right, and so I kind of had a personal journey with this a number of years ago, where I took my nutrition really under control and subscribed to the Eat Right for Your Blood Type theory. And really what that says is that on a macro level, our body processes food differently. And the thesis of that book is that based on each blood type, on a macro level, our bodies process foods. And so we have some foods that are great for us, some foods that are just neutral, and some foods that are bad for us. And so the theory is you eat more of the foods that are good for you and less of the foods that are bad for you. And the net result will be you living a more healthier life. And so as you can see, I dropped somewhere around 25 pounds. That was about 5 years ago, and kept it all off, maintaining this lifestyle. So it wasn't a fad diet. It wasn't anything like that. It was just me being conscious about the foods that I ate. And again, it's not about being perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, right? I'm going to have a cheeseburger tonight. And that's okay, because I've been eating really well the rest of the day and through the week. And so I can splurge a little bit, knowing that that it's all about the collective health. It's the whole that keeps me at the weight and at the health that I desire to be. So as we think through that, there are really 5 things that we can do immediately to impact our health and nutrition. These are really simple, and yet they can create a big impact. And these are all things really you've heard before. We're just going to repeat them here. Decide to limit your processed carbs and sugars, right? Drink more water. Eat more vegetables and plant-based. Drink more water. It bears repeating. Eat more vegetables and plant-based foods. Include a lot of protein in your diet, and eliminate or reduce alcohol. Now, point here is, again, not to go cold turkey. I certainly haven't gone cold turkey. I don't want anyone to go cold turkey, right? Food's a big part of my life and things that I enjoy. And I know that I've got to make a conscious decision, really each and every day, each and every meal, really, as to what I'm eating and why I'm eating. And so as you think about that list of 5, what can you do one of those things? Can you do a sum of what? Can you drink a little bit more water, right? Can you reduce your alcohol intake maybe by half or maybe a third? Really, nutrition is not a 180 thing. It's with small, gradual steps. It's building habits. So consider something like this. Consider something on that list and implement it and see how your energy feels and your overall health feels.
And then finally, the third lens is in our health journey is movement. And in her book, The Joy of Movement, Kelly McGonigal, she shares that the human body actually produces something called neurosteroids. It's commonly what we refer to as maybe the runner's high or the exercise high, and it comes from the endorphins, which really give us that buzz that help you to feel calm, relaxed, and hopeful. Movement really does lead to peak joy. When you're in movement, your muscles, they secrete that chemical that acts as the antidepressant, and that helps you really cope with stress. So, and those are produced in your muscles, and you have to, scientifically, you have to contract your muscles to get those chemicals out of your muscles and into your bloodstream. If you don't contract them, then those chemicals don't come out. So our muscles are really like natural pharmacies. So these secret proteins, they react in your brain, and they act as that antidepressant. They increase motivation, and they help you learn from experience. So when it comes to movement, one of the easiest things you can do besides the nutrition to improve your overall health is for you to make movement a habit. We want you to walk, run, maybe it's weight training or joining an exercise class. Just do something that gets your body engaged and gets those muscles in movement. So, and movement is scientifically proven to really help your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. So depending on where you are in your movement and health journey, figure out where you're at and where you could go. Maybe it's you're doing nothing and you could do 30 minutes a week or 30 minutes every other day. It could be as simple as lead generation. And Carter and I, as professional coaches, we spend a lot of time, we have a walking treadmill. So a lot of the times when we're doing our calls with our coaching clients, we're on our treadmill movement, in movement, walking at a slow pace on the treadmill just to maintain that constant level of movement. So the point is, really, you got to start somewhere, right? So we have to start somewhere. So that's how we're going to start this to transform together in this class through all of these pillars. And then finally, when it comes to health, rest. Rest is super important. And the importance is clear from so much of the research that's been done. I'm sure that a lot of you maybe heard some of this research. But what we're going to talk about today is a study that kind of came from the Harvard Business Review, the making of a corporate athlete, where these two gentlemen studied corporate athletes and compared them to actual professional sports athletes. And they found out that the demand on executives to sustain a high performance day in and day out, year in and year out, really dwarfs the challenges faced by a professional athlete. For instance, the professional athlete spends about most of their time practicing, and a very small percentage, just a couple of hours a day, actually in competition. Whereas the typical executive, in contrast, they devote almost no time to training, and they have to perform on demand, high pressure, 10, sometimes 12, 14 hours a day. Athletes, they have an off season, where executives, if they get 2 to 3 weeks of vacation a year, that's great, right? And the average athlete spends about 7 years competing professionally, and the average executive is about 40 to 50 years on the job. So the key in that is that the corporate athlete, the actual person who works in the corporate world, or the entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur in real estate, works so much more than these professional athletes. And they even dove into the key in really increasing physical strength is a phenomenon called as super competition, or super, not competition, that's probably important too, but super compensation is what I meant to say, super compensation, which is a balance of work-rest ratios. So in weightlifting, this would involve stressing the muscle to a point where its fibers, literally, they break down, and then you give those muscles adequate recovery time. They're going to heal, and then they're going to go stronger. That's weight training, that's weightlifting. Yet if you persist at stressing that muscle and you don't give that muscle rest, then you're going to have acute and chronic damage, aren't you? So conversely, if you fail to stress a muscle at all, it's going to create weakness and atrophy. Think about, like, if you were to have broken an arm or a leg, or anybody that that the muscle shrinks over time. And in both cases, the enemy is not stress, it's the failure to oscillate between energy expenditure and recovery. So that same lesson is applied in the corporate setting. The problem is not so much that they're working too much, is that there's not giving themselves enough emotional and mental time to recover and rest, and creating rituals around that. So what they suggest is Build in rest and recovery rituals into a typical day. Taking a vacation in the summer or over the holidays, that's not enough. Leisure activities, sports, hobbies. We know that Winston Churchill and George Bush, both world leaders under a lot of pressure, took up painting as a way to rest. In one of the books I've read, Stillness is the Key, Winston Churchill said, I guess that he was quoted saying that if I can have a hobby and be a bricklayer and be a painter, and I have the time for that, so do you, right? And he was quoted as saying that. Are you building in those rest and recovery rituals into your world? And that's really, really key.
So we're moving on to our final foundational pillar, and that is spirituality. And we look at that through the lens of purpose, reflection, and stillness. So for you guys, again, we're on page 8 of your workbook. So as you're following along and taking notes, make sure that you're looking at page 8. So purpose. What is your purpose? Really, that's kind of a profound question and a conundrum for many, right? Yet when you really consider it, your purpose really is your internal core values, often referred to as your big why. You know, Kristen referenced the book Stillness is Key by Ryan Holiday. He discusses the idea of virtue in a way that I believe one can discover their purpose really by knowing who they are at the core. So what are your own core values? What principles do you hold true? What moral compass guides you, and what we refuse to compromise on. These are all thought-provoking, yet when you consider the answers, it helps you find your true meaning and purpose. One of the keys to determining your purpose really is tied to reflection. And so when we think about reflection, we really need to take that time to really determine our core purpose. So reflection is defined as a serious thought or consideration. So let me ask you to think and consider, when is the last time you really took time to think and consider? It's very likely some of us do this better than others, yet with the constant demands of life, right, there's not a lot of time in the day for us to do this. So unless we deliberately make the time, right, we time block it, we make it part of a ritual, reflection magically doesn't appear in our time. So the 5 best ways to add reflection into your world. Number 1, journaling as a way of self-reflection. Journaling is so cool. It can cure anxieties, assumptions. It can bring objectivity and clarity into powerful ideas. It's been referred to as spiritual windshield wipers.
Windshield wipers.
Windshield wipers. Yeah. Easier for you to say, apparently, right? Prayer. Connecting to a higher power or source, acknowledging there's something greater than yourself. Meditation. We can meditate a lot of different ways. The ones that are most popular: mindfulness meditation, spiritual meditation, focused movement, mantra, transcendental, and guided meditation. Thinking time. That's scheduling time, ideally at the same time each day or even each week. And when you do that, the brain becomes trained to shut down and think clearly. You train your brain to do that when you create a system around time where you take a moment to think and reflect. Finally, number 5 is white space. That's deliberate time in your daily schedule where you give your brain a nap. It's not a literal nap. You're not going to sleep, so don't get caught under the desk. Yet it's like a nap for your brain.
Although I'd take a nap.
I don't even know where to go with that one. So Steve Jobs is famous for saying, it's on your screen. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And that's why spending time in self-reflection is all about, and that's why it's so important and so critical.
And finally, stillness. This is our final lens of the spirituality pillar. And it's derived from the concept, which interestingly enough, almost every religion and philosophy universally agree that stillness is an important aspect in feeling fulfilled and creating happiness. And I don't need to share statistics with you for you to be aware that there is a constant barrage of noise in our lives, right? It's like daily, it's 24/7 if we allow it. It's news media, social media, text, app notifications, Email, oh my gosh, email is probably the biggest offender, at least for me. It's like constantly like all these alerts tugging at you as if everything's really important. It's I think of it as my toddler saying, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy," which she does from time to time. You get the picture, right? If you probably have heard that said by somebody. And so it's turning that off, and yet we can't hear the noise unless we deliberately turn it off, because we've allowed this kind of this creep to come in. Is we have to intentionally turn it off. So there are 3 things that we really need to do and can do to increase stillness in our lives. Number 1, that would be limit our inputs, limit the alerts, limit the people that have access to us, limit email and app notifications, limit all the things that get our attention, limit all the things that like make you look at your phone all the time, right? Turn that off. Number 2, slow down. We have to ignore what's not important and delay our responses. There's the decision-making quadrant, the urgent versus important, and I reference that in coaching quite a bit. Have you ever found yourself unable to respond to a problem? And I know this happens to me all the time. Unable to respond to a problem in an appointment for a while, and then you return that person's call and then or that email, and then the problem's already resolved. You're like, oh, I already got my answer. Awesome, great. So just be slower to respond to what's not super urgent. I'm not saying don't respond to anything urgent, just have that filter, slow down. And number 3, practice patience. Really identify, when are you present, and when do you allow your mind to wander? Instead of, photographing every meal for social media and taking a picture and then posting it, just be present and enjoy that. Stop thinking about the future, what's going to happen, and just be present in the moment. Carter says a lot, be present where your feet are. So that really wraps up our 6 foundational pillars and the why behind why each pillar is so important. Our goal for you as we move past this hour that we're together today right now is for you to really spend some time to think deeply on each pillar. Your action plan begins on page 9. And so what we're going to have you do for your action plan, and I fully acknowledge there's a lot of pages and there are a lot of questions, and you're going to spend probably your full hour of time really in reflection on each pillar. Yet what this is going to do, it's going to help you really build and layer in what we're going to be talking about in the next 2 sessions. So our goal for you with all of these questions is for you to gain clarity around your version of living experientially within each pillar. So we have questions broken down for each pillar. So of each of the 6, you're going to spend some time in each of those 6 pillars, reflecting individually per pillar. And again, to reference the question I had, somebody asked, are you going to check our answers? What's the right answer? There really is no right answer. This is individual. It's personal for each of you. We want you to define what it means for you to live your best life, for you to have one that's well-rounded and harmonious and integrated work, personal, spiritual, health life. And when you have clarity on what that best life for you is, and that's you specifically, not me, and keep in mind everybody's different, that's when you're going to be able to really choose what you say yes and choose what you say no to. I know, for instance, last year, one of the things we wanted to do experientially was to go to Italy and spend 2 weeks with our daughter in Italy, which we did. That might not be exciting to you. We know that Mr. Chris Suarez is going to be going to Disney over spring break. That might not be your version of an experiential life either. So it's going to be a personal journey. So there are no wrong answers. Just playing small is probably the wrong answer. Being inauthentic, thinking about what somebody else thinks you should say or do versus what you internally, want to do and say. So be authentic with yourself, and only then can you really make that shift to live your best life.
Yeah, and so as you complete this week's action plan, know that you're creating the building blocks for our next 2 sessions. So next week, we're going to dive into determining which of the pillars for you are drivers, sustainers, and maintainers. And then we'll be able to assemble our personal mission statement. So we're going to take care of that next week in section 3. And then in section 4, we're going to put all this together. And we're going to work through all this and create an action plan so that, again, you can go through and live your life experientially on a yearly basis, a monthly basis, weekly, and even daily. And so our hope for you guys, and we trust that you'll take this today, really reflect and get ready to create some great drivers, sustainers, and maintainers next week. Until then, also, if you're enjoying this class, and you're getting a lot out of it, feel free to go to social media, put it on Facebook, Instagram, put your experiential life on there, what you're doing to live it, what you're learning, maybe some ahas, hashtag experience growth. That's experience with an X growth, and to tell everybody what you're doing and how much fun you're having in this class. And until next time, if you need us, you know where to find us. Make it a great day and make it a great week. Go live experientially.
Bye, everyone.